time and time again has proven that ultimately it all comes down to you. And it might seem crazy, it might seem fear-mongering to talk about this type of stuff, to learn this type of information. And yet, throughout time in history, very recent history in fact, people have found themselves in some very tough situations. The craziest thing to me about combat survival is that oftentimes it occurs after evasion. And from watching the evasion video or beginning the evasion video, you know how intense and how brutal evasion can be. It can last for hours, it can last for weeks, it can last for months. But many individuals throughout history have found themselves evading from enemy forces. And once they've evaded from those enemy forces, suddenly they find themselves either so far in civilization in order to lose their invaders, or sometimes they find themselves so far in the wilderness due to trying to lose whoever's pursuing them that suddenly, after weeks, after months of evasion, they have to survive now. But it's not just survival, it's combat survival, because there's still an element of being hunted. They could still run into enemy forces. People have oftentimes evaded to where they thought their front lines were of their own forces, just like we talked about in this little intro right here, and their forces had to retreat due to being compromised. There are so many scenarios where combat survival can play a role. It can be something as simple as everything shuts down in your country. Foreign forces invaded, and suddenly you're just merely surviving to keep your family alive. Don't let the time that you are finally learning and practicing this stuff be when you're looking at your family as they're starving, as they don't have any water, or God help you, just for yourself, when you're just trying to keep yourself alive, because it is a brutal situation. The world is brutal, the world is violent, and nobody cares. The only person that is going to save you is going to be yourself. But before we get into it, we do have to thank our sponsors. They do allow us to make this content for free, to bring it to you at no cost to yourselves. So we have a big thank you to the Sonoran Desert Institute. If you're looking to get your start in gunsmithing, they are the people to go to. We do love them. They support the channel, all of our crazy antics from survival to, gun stuff and all that goodness. Of course, who else do we have, Micah?
Primary Arms.
We do. We love them very much. That's actually where we got the ACOG from. They sell a variety of optics. They sell excellent optics made by them, and the compact is one of our favorite optics. So go and check them out. Don't forget that there's a very special Skittles-related thing coming out very soon, so stay tuned for that. And then, of course, dry fire. You should 100% use Mantis. We use the hell of it. It turns your gun into a dry fire machine. We love Mantis, right, Micah?
It rocks.
It does. And then, of course, big thing at AAC Ammunition. Not a lot of shooting in this video, but they do allow us to train, and they make ammunition at a great price. So go and check them out. With all that being said, let's get into the video. I served 9 years active duty in the military. I did 6 of those years as a survival, evasion, resistance, and escape instructor. This is literally what I taught to a variety of people. I've also, in addition to that, spent an inordinate amount of time at civilian survival schools from Montana to across the pond, everywhere, from a variety of individuals, from your Israeli specialists in desert survival to your crazy Norwegians. I've learned it all, and I'm very thankful for all those people who have taught me. After that, I served as a TAC-P, as a special warfare officer within TAC-P. So, done this a lot. This is what I lived and breathed for a long time, and I've taught a whole lot of people. Combat survival, the thing that you have to realize about it is you're doing what you've always done. You need to keep yourself at 98.6. You've been doing it your entire life without you knowing. You've been drinking water, you've been eating food, you've been keeping yourself clean. The only thing that we're doing here is we're going to modify a lot of your behaviors, a lot of things you do, of course, in relation to food and water, to ensure that we can survive long term. The best way I could describe it is when we're talking survival, even combat survival, all I'm doing is I'm getting you to a level of what like an 11-year-old was like in 1830. In 1830, an 11-year-old could start a fire in the rain, he could skin animals, he could do all that stuff. In this industrialized society that we live in the United States and elsewhere throughout the world, we've lost a lot of these critical skills because they're not as pertinent to us, and that's okay. What we're gonna do in this video is relearn them and also apply them to a survival in combat situation. So today we're going to be touching on 5 main things. So there are 5 things that you need to stay alive in a combat survival scenario. So first thing we're going to be talking about today is going to be health. How to keep yourself healthy, how to treat wounds, how to stay alive. Things that you guys already know. Next we'll be talking about personal protection. That is going to be how to build a shelter, both improvised, both using natural stuff to keep yourself out of the elements. We'll be learning how to make a fire in a combat situation so you're not spotted, and then we'll be talking about our equipment and how to care for it. Next up after that, we have sustenance. We're going to be talking about gathering water, different methods, and of course, food as well, natural plants to animals. After that, we'll talk comms and signaling as necessary, and finally, travel, which we'll be touching upon lightly. That will be a further video where we'll really delve into it. So first thing that we need to do is going to be health. A survival situation can start in so many different ways, but one of the things I've always taught people is if we were, coming back from a patrol in a vehicle and the vehicle rolls, or you're shot at and you evade and finally you get a second to just catch your breath. One thing I've always taught you guys, in my military, you guys probably already know, it's going to be a blood sweep. So I've just gotten away from gunfire. A lot of times your adrenaline is pumping, and the question is going to be, was I hit? Do I have a scratch? Is there something bleeding that I need to stop and take care of immediately? So we're going to do a blood sweep first. So all a blood sweep is I'm going to have my mostly clean hands, and I'm going to be feeling through my body and then checking to see if I have blood, if I have obvious bleeding. So first thing we'll do is we'll come through our arms, check, under the armpits, check. I can check down my chest, down the armpits, get under my kit and my gear. If you can get under your layers, get under there, check. Reach back as far as you can, check for that blood, down through. Of course, right there we have the old fake wound from the filming. Check the back, see if I have blood, and I'm checking to see if I have any blood. Oftentimes, whether it be a stab from a tree, gashing your arm or something like that, if you have any of that immediate bleeding, that's something that you're going to need to take care of. So that's going to bring us right to taking care of wounds. So let's talk about different ways to take care of wounds in a combat survival environment. So when it comes to our combat health and keeping wounds clean, the biggest thing is that if we have some type of bleed, if we're shot, if we cut ourselves, we need to, of course, control as best as we can. Best thing you can do in survival situations, if you have some type of bandage that you should be carrying on you, get that pressure on it. If you're unable to control that pressure, of course, a tourniquet is going to be your last option. There are a million different compression bandages that can apply that pressure to help that wound coagulate. The point is, a lot of people are trained to just go straight to that tourniquet, but in a survival situation, when you apply that tourniquet, if you apply it tight enough to cut off circulation, it might not always be the best option because you don't know when that survival situation is going to end. You can't keep a tourniquet on for that long. With that being said, if you do need to apply the tourniquet, and this is where all my medics are going to cringe, to stop that blood flow, what we typically teach, or what's been taught to me both civilian side and mil side, is that you apply the tourniquet to stop that bleeding because you can't stop it otherwise. Once you're able to, within the hour, to stop and reassess that wound, you're going to very slowly back that windlass off. Start taking the pressure off to see if that bleeding continues. If you're able to back that windlass off all the way without any bleeding, without any clots blowing out, that's when you can then apply a pressure bandage over that because you likely didn't need the tourniquet in the first place. But the point is a tourniquet is more than likely in a survival situation going to be a death sentence for that particular limb. So use them when you absolutely have to, but understand there are other ways to stop bleeding, and oftentimes they can be stopped that way unless it's like some crazy arterial bleed or something like that. We've talked about pretty intense ones. Understand that if you break a leg, you can splint it. An easy way you can splint it is if we come over here. Though I'm going to make a little bit more noise and telegraph where I've been, I can do something as simple as taking a branch and if, say, I broke my leg right here, I'm able to get two of those and then wrap up and down and underneath my leg to immobilize above and below the joint. That's going to be extremely helpful, and then something that I can do expediently. You might not always have a splint on you, so understand that there are various improvised methods that you can use to keep yourself healthy. So we've talked about a lot of kind of more intense wounds. Understand that combat medicine is a very wide topic, and I'd highly recommend you take more time on it. This is simply a primer. But what's more important is that we keep ourselves alive long-term through hygiene, through just generally taking care of yourself. So how do you do it in a combat survival environment? Let's talk about it. The biggest thing is going to be your feet. You're going to be traveling, you're going to be trying to get back to where you're going, to get back home, or to get back to somebody who can help you. So if we don't take care of our feet, well, you're not going to get very far at all. Before we start on that, important note, like I always talk about, if you're lucky enough to have a rifle or some type of weapon, make sure you always keep that within arm's reach. that's going to be a standard that you always be held to. So I have that moment to stop in order to take care of my feet, whether that be at the end of the day, if I cross a river and I get super wet and I'm in a safe position, I can go ahead and change those socks. So you should always have an extra change of socks on you. I already have a pack video, so we're not going to talk too much about it. Suffice to say, I like to say what my buddy Fife says, who did the same job I did, which is when you know a lot, you don't need a lot. Because the thing you got to think about is you're packed for combat, you don't have a lot of room for survival gear. So make do with not a whole lot. So I've swapped socks. It's going to be really important, I know it sounds lame, is to keep clean, dry socks on you as much as possible. We generally recommend merino wool, some type, Darn Tough, Smart Wool. There are tons of different manufacturers. Find a good wool sock that works for you. We mostly use Darn Tough on this channel. Micah, what do you use?
The Costco Merinos.
They work. The point is, once we've swapped our socks, we probably have maybe 2 to 3 pairs in a combat pack, maybe at most 1 extra pair. So you need to make sure that you're rotating them. Now, oftentimes these socks will be wet, so the question is, how do I dry them? There's a couple different ways. If we're in a really cold environment, it's actually not too difficult. You're just gonna hang them off the edge of your pack and you're going to let them freeze dry. So on this pack right here, I can simply tuck them through the loops, tighten that down as I'm going. Those are going to freeze dry, and that's going to, then I can just simply knock off that ice and they're gonna dry quite quickly. In a dry environment, that's gonna be fairly easy, just hang them off your pack. In a wet environment is where it becomes more difficult. So in a wet environment, what I typically will do is I'll take my socks and I'm going to tuck them into my layers right here. For my guys who attended SEER, you know what I'm talking about. And if you need to get them a little deeper, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna rotate them against your body heat, and that will allow your body heat to dry them out as you're moving. You wanna tuck them off enough so that they're not exposed to the elements, but that will dry out your socks fairly quickly. So after about an hour of walking, I'll swap them. So I'll get those parts that were against my body on the outside. I'll tuck those parts that were on the outside on the inside. And then I'll continue to move. I guess you're stuffing your pants. A couple other really important things when it comes to foot care. Make sure if you have the time, when it's at the end of the day, or if you're sleeping during the day, whatever you're doing for your evasion, which we talked about in the last video, that you do take off your boots and that you massage your feet. You 100% need it. It will keep the blood flow, it will keep them really healthy. So again, change those socks, massage those feet. It's gonna go a long way. Next, let's talk about how we don't become all gross and grody, because I know a lot of you guys need like 5 showers a day. So how do we survive? Best way is gonna be, if you have wet wipes, those are easy, those can work. You can also use leaves that are wet, use those to scrub your body. You can use loamy soil, so it's like that aerated soil kind of right on a riverbed. You can get into there, especially if you don't have soap, and most guys I know aren't carrying soap, and you can scrub your body with that. But the thing that I often have used is an air bath. That works wonders. So all you're gonna do is strip down, which we're not gonna do right now because who knows who's watching. And you're going to take some time in the sun. You're not going to be sunbathing. What you're doing is allowing those wet areas of your body to dry out. You're allowing the UV rays from the sun to kill any of that bacteria that's bad on your skin or anything like that. It's going to do a lot. Typically, anywhere from about 20 to 30 minutes is going to be pretty good. An hour is recommended. Oftentimes in a combat survival situation, you don't have that much time, but this is going to be situation dependent on how far you are. If you're super far away, just out there, and number one priority is survival, yeah, get those air baths in. But the last thing I'll talk about is going to be teeth. So, if you don't have a toothbrush, what you can do is you can take the green alive twigs, peel that bark off, and all you're gonna do is nibble on the end to fray it, and that will make a nice little toothbrush for you that you can use to scrub your teeth. And that works really, really well at getting any of that plaque off, any of the tartar. Long term, it's not great, but understand that people throughout time and history have used chewing sticks all throughout their life. So make sure that you keep your teeth healthy. It might seem a little bit ridiculous, but tooth decay, gums, all that stuff really matters. For your gums, what you need to do is you're gonna take your finger and you're gonna vigorously rub your gums like you're doing coke or something like that. And that's gonna help with that blood flow when it comes to your gums. So again, take care of your teeth, take care of your body. That will benefit you long term. Now, you're taking care of your body, you're going throughout nature, suddenly we see a huge storm brewing on the horizon, and we know we have a big storm coming, it's coming to the end of the night. We probably need to get some type of shelter down, because if there's one thing that humans cannot do, it's we really can't just brave the elements without any type of shelter over our heads. So let's talk about shelter.
Mike, what do you do for your ass?
Wet wipes if you have them. Leaves, there's a lot of leaves that are really soft. Find a soft leaf, as long as it's not shiny. Shiny leaves are typically poisonous or some type of oil on them that's going to react badly. So use those soft leaves, scrub your ass. Use water, like if you find a river, scrub it, man. Keep it clean. You don't want that gross swamp booty. Shelters. So there are a million different ways to build shelters, and to be clear, we're only teaching you 2 today. So first up is going to be Ranger Diamond, that's made with poncho. You should always have a poncho with you, which is why we teach it. It is a wonderful shelter. Next up will be a natural shelter, i.e. finding something in nature that's going to fit the bill. A couple things you need to think about when it comes to a shelter. First off, how close are you to enemy forces? If you're closer, you need to think about being as far away from those forces as possible. You want to be low to the ground. You want to ensure that you're going to blend into the background. And another thing is, like, don't skyline yourself. So don't like have your shelter on the most prominent peak. Like if we look out here at this beautiful landscape, imagine if I just had my shelter just right out in the open on the top of a peak. Really cool views when I wake up, at the same time really exposed to wind and really exposed to enemy eyes. And of course, if at all possible, try to have yourself close to a water source. You need to be getting water, so that is going to be a consideration. Of course, the closer you are to water, the closer you are to possibly enemy forces, because who needs to go to water, Micah?
Everybody.
Absolutely everybody. And even if it's even if something's happening in your country, in the US of A, in Arma 3, and everyone's fighting each other, and there's somebody down there getting water, and they don't know you, and they report you to the wrong enemy force, and boom, that's a bad day for you. So, starting off with our Ranger Diamond, it is not what you'd call a strict evasion shelter, but it does blend with the background. It is very low to the ground, and the biggest thing about it is it's going to be big enough for you and your gear. So if you have more people, you can build a bigger Ranger Diamond with more ponchos and have a nice little house party. Don't do that. Typically, this is going to be used for a one-man show, so I need to have it fit my pack, my rifle, and me comfortably. It needs to be quick to put up and quick to take down, and in this case, like we talked about before, when you know a lot, you don't need a lot. So all the stuff that I'm going to build it with is stuff that can be used for many, many other things. So first things first, you should always have a line kit on you. This is going to be paracord that the inner core has been stripped out of. You're going to burn the ends. Typically, I do about 6 to 8 lines. You're going to have a 12-foot one and a 6-foot one. These are daisy chained together to keep them stored. You shouldn't just throw your lines into your pack without daisy chaining them in some form or fashion. So we have our lines. We have our poncho right here. So the cool thing about the poncho, it can keep you out of the rain. We have the nice little hood right there. It can be used as a pack cover, and it can be made into a shelter. So in preparation for making it into a shelter, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cinch that hood down. Tie that little guy off. And then we're going to go ahead and get this prepped up. If possible, I want to make sure that I am in an area that's relatively flat. You don't want to be sliding, because I'll tell you what, if you build your shelter on like just a straight slope, you're going to slide as you sleep, and it's a bad time. So try to have it relatively flat, relatively clear if at all possible, while still being relatively hidden in a forest or something along those lines. So if you'll come in right here, Micah, the first thing we're going to start with is going to be a girth hitch. So I'm going to take my line, going to make a nice little bite into it. I'm going to take my bite, I'm going to put it through the poncho. I'm going to take those 2 ends, I'm going to pull them through that bite. See, even if I pull one end, it's nice and cinched down. Then I'm going to do the same on all 4 corners. I'm going to take that, put it around my finger. I have that bite right there. That bite is going to go through the eyelet. Everybody see that? Now through that loop that I just put through that bite I just put through the eyelet, I'm going to take those 2 strands, I'm going to pull them through. Once I've done that and I tighten those down, that will cinch down in that eyelet. Those aren't going anywhere. And get it about chest height, and there are many ways to make the Ranger Diamond. I suppose we'll start with the simplest way. Wrap it around right here. Okay.
taking my end, going over that line, gonna pinch that right there. That allows me to work with this. I can create that bite, and I can pull that running end through the bite. Now, this is still gonna slip, so what I'm gonna do in addition to that is I'm gonna do what's called a safety. So I'm gonna take that big old standing end that I have right there, I'm gonna wrap it around and pull another bite through for what's called a winter hitch right there. So that allows me to then easily undo it. So the whole point of these knots is that you need to be able to put them up and take them down in a cinch. So you don't want to have because if you don't know how to knot, tie a lot, and that will work. However, we want to try to preserve our lines. So if we're able to use knots that work well, then we can make sure that we can easily take this down if we needed. And also, we can not destroy our lines in order to take them down. So I'm gonna string it right to this tree right here. Go ahead and pull that taut. Get that a little lower. 45 to a 60-degree angle on that is going to be good to go. And I'm gonna do the same hitch, just a trucker's hitch. Pin, especially when it's under tension, make sure that you pinch that guy. Then make sure you pull that safety through, because otherwise that loop will come undone. Boom, there we go. Okay, so we have our first two up. From here, it's gonna be a simple affair of pulling this top from here. So the nice thing with the Ranger Diamond, it can be made anywhere, off boulders, off vehicles, off trees, off whatever you need to make it off of. And you're just gonna improvise with whatever is gonna get you that angle that you need. So in this case, we don't have a tree right here, so what can we possibly use? We can use down logs, we can use our packs, many different things. In this case, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna grab another log in order to keep this weight down. The nice thing about something movable is then I can put it where I need it to be. So once we have that other side down, we're simply going to string out the other side. Now on this side over here, we do have a lot more to work with. So I can simply, if at all possible, I want it in that same angle coming from the center. You might not always have that. That's totally fine. You know, a little off kilter is going to be okay. Easy, nice little shelter right here. Take my pack. Go ahead and put it inside. This is actually pretty nice, so we'll take a little nap right here. Is that okay, Micah? We've been filming for a while, man. Now, we can also make this lower to the ground. So if we have a lot of rain coming in, we can get this thing even lower. We can get the sides lower. If you have snow, you can also pack up snow. You can pack up mounds. You can pack up anything. There are a lot of ways to modify the very simple Ranger Diamond, but as you can see, it works quite well. I lived in these for a really unfortunate amount of time, and I can't recommend them enough. They do work really well. So we talked about a shelter we can build with something we have. Let's talk about finding a shelter. See, the nice thing, Micah, how long did it take me to take down?
I looked away for like 10 seconds.
So that's the nice thing about it being a kind of more combat expedient shelter. It's very quick to take down. You can pack that away in your pack quite quickly. If you really were to hear a helicopter or for some reason you need to get away, you could definitely do it when it comes to the Ranger Diamond. Ready? Okay, so I've had a moment to take my breath. I've taken down my Ranger Diamond, I've pulled my lines off. Now what I've done is I line them all up. I'm going to daisy chain them up to make sure that I'm taking care of my stuff. So to daisy chain, all my lines are at the same length right here. I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to do an overhand loop. So the lines are going over. Everybody see that? Then I'm going to, with my little fingers right here, grab that, pull another loop through. Reach through the same direction every time. I'm simply going to pull that loop through. Now, once we get to the end, we're going to change that up a little. So once we get to the end right here, instead of pulling a loop, I'm just going to pull all those strings out. That makes sure that it doesn't come undone inside my pack. Then I can simply undo that. So one more time for you guys. Overhand loop, pull it through. Overhand loop, pull it through. When you do this enough, you're just going to get super quick at it. And that is how you make a daisy chain. One of the easiest natural shelters you can find is simply going to be a tree well. So whether that be in the snow, whether that be just like right here, we have this big old pine tree right here. I can simply get under the fronds and that will give me a lot of protection from the elements. So simply going to get in here, situate those, and sitting really close to the base of the tree, I'm actually doing pretty good. Not only that, but I'm also pretty camouflaged. But I can also increase that camouflage by doing one thing. So I'll show you guys that right here. So one thing that I can do inside those tree wells right here, underneath the palm tree to increase the camouflage a little bit more, is if you take my poncho, all I'm gonna do is take a line, I'm gonna pull a slip knot. So I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna do an overhand loop, I'm gonna pull a loop through, and that will cinch down on something. So pull that slip loop through, simply going to capture the hood right here that I have knotted up. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm simply gonna hang that in a branch right above me and drape this over me. I have spent, here comes Mike, he's like, spent years, huh, Mike, living that? Pretty much. So I'm gonna get back into my little shelter. Go ahead and hang this guy up as close to being above my head as possible. Pull a little trucker's hitch right there to get it hung up. Always a trucker's hitch, right, Micah?
Always.
Then, what I can do, especially if I have a little bit of rain dripping down on me, I can get under this poncho. I have spent so much time sleeping in these types of shelters, and they work extremely well. They also increase your camouflage, so Michael will back away a little bit, get further away, and take a look at me. Last thing to consider is when it's snowing, the snow won't get into the trunk, so you can actually climb down like 2 to 3 feet into this guy. Put that poncho over yourself, line the bottom with it, and you have a really good sleeping arrangement. And so long as you're covering your tracks pretty well in the snow, it's gonna be really hard to find, because as you can see, just spanning out right here, there are trees freaking everywhere. They're not gonna search every tree. You guys are idiots. They're gonna be looking for army shelters. They're not gonna be looking for trees. So we just heard a helicopter. We need to get some type of shelter, so we're gonna move right now. I'm gonna find something. If I'm not already in the trees, get into the tree line immediately to help block yourself from the sky. Yeah. You probably didn't see me there. Evasion. Living under fallen trees, under rocks, under logs. If you've spent any time in the woods, you know that in draws, trees tend to fall into them. It's a perfect place to hide. We'll create all these little places you can live under these dead logs. 100% a great thing to do. So whatever you do when it comes to these more evasion type combat shelters, you want to make sure that you are low to the ground, that it blends. For example, if this is the only fallen tree in a clearing and there's no trees around, probably don't sleep in it. It should be something where it blends in really well with everything around it. It shouldn't draw the eye. So what we typically say is below thigh level is pretty good. Now, when you're getting into them, you're typically gonna make a little bit of noise. You're cracking branches, that's life. Sound doesn't travel nearly as far as light does though. So their ability to see you is gonna be number one. Now, once you get settled in, you're gonna make far less noise. Now, these are a great place to sleep. Spent many a night sleeping in something like this or sleeping under logs. Or is there a possibility of running into critters? 100%. If you can, try to keep an eye on game trails. So if this is like a main game trail, don't do that. One time I slept in this bramble of branches that was right on a game trail, and I woke up to like this weird noise, and it was a elk had gotten his like antlers caught in the brambles, and so like when I woke up, he was like going and I was like, what the fuck? And it went boom, and it like just blew up my shelter, and I was like, oh my god, it like charged off. Scariest day of my life. I actually peed myself. Sometimes you don't know till you're there, but stay away from anthills, right? If you get in there and suddenly you're in an anthill, that sucks. Move, because those things will bite the shit out of you. Sometimes you have to do it. There's been times when, you know, in these evasion scenarios, civilian side or otherwise, where I'm being hunted, and the helicopter's flying right over. Some guys just popped out of a vehicle really close by and had to dive into something like this, and I just dove right into an ant's nest. Whatever, suck it up, dude. You're gonna have to wait. So like, I waited in one for an hour while ants were just crawling over me, biting the shit out of me. It sucked. I'm not allergic. If I am, I also have an EpiPen. Keep meds on you. But you're gonna survive. It's going to be terrible though. When it comes to evasion shelter, if you can be close to water, as always, that's gonna be a good thing. Typically not. Try to have some water on you, some type of bag or otherwise, and we'll talk about that in just a teeny bit right here. But we have our evasion shelters, we have our made shelters. You can also combine the two. I can get my poncho under here, I can improve it. If you're going to add any branches, any rocks to or something like that, don't gather it around your immediate area. A lot of people will make the mistake of like grabbing logs and sticks right around their natural or evasion shelter, and there's like evasion shelter and there's like just barren ground. It's like all like bunched up. Don't make like a nest like you're some type of beaver or something. Make sure that you get it far away and that you bring it in. You don't want to make it look abnormal when you're doing it. And the only way you're gonna know if it looks abnormal is by spending time in the woods. So get in the woods. There can be some times when you might be so cold that despite all the good clothing you have on from layering properly, you might just need to start a fire. A couple things you need to think about when it comes to fire is going to be that fire is extremely visible to imaging technology. Thermal, night vision can see it up to 20 miles, even further if from the sky. I've been in a helicopter under night vision and thermal scanning for fires, and I will tell you, it is incredibly visible from a very, very far distance, especially just out in nature. Nothing makes light like that unless it's a forest fire. So you're probably gonna stick out like a sore thumb. So understand that when you're making a fire, it needs to be in the most dire circumstances. And when it comes to combat survival, we want to assume we're still being hunted to some extent. So we're going to keep this fire very small. We're going to keep it limited, and we're going to use what we need, and then we're going to move on. When it comes to finding fire sources, there's a lot of ways to do it. The thing about it is anybody can make a fire in a dry environment. I'm sure you've gone out to the lake with your buddies, you've gathered some sticks off the ground, and you started a fire. But today, it has rained. It's been raining for a straight week right now. Micah, all the wood that we have on here on the ground, how would you describe it?
Oh, I mean, you can see the light shimmering off all the stuff. Everything's wet.
Everything's completely wet. So when we think about making a fire in a survival situation, we need to find dry wood. So the first place I want to look for dry wood is going to be dead standing trees or trees at the lower branches where they are dead at the bottom. So for example, right here we have a tree that is dead. It's a little bit punky, and by punky I mean it's rotted a little bit, but the more angle, the more lean it has to it, the more rain and water it's going to catch. So we want to find that tree that's just direct upright, and we want to take as little as possible, because every time I break a branch, especially if it's alive, I'm going to have that nice white mark on there. Versus after it's been a while, it's grayed up, so it could be a possible sign to a tracker if we're being tracked by somebody who knows their shit. So right here, I have a bunch of these little twigs right here that are down at the bottom. They're nice and dead. And if you're not sure if they're dead, one thing that we can do too, we can take our knife. You don't need a fancy knife, by the way. This is a knife I use actually as a survival instructor. I've used the shit out of it. All the finish is gone. It's just an SE4. They work fine. You can scrape into the twig a little bit. And what you can do is the most sensitive part in your body for wetness is your lips. It's a really good way to detect the difference. So we used to always say, give the tree a little kisser, and that's nice dry wood. Another thing that we can look at, Mike, if you want to come in right here, is this right here. That right there is sap. That is extremely flammable. That can be used to help you maintain fires, to start fires. Understand it will put out a little bit of black smoke, but that is something I'm gonna want to have. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna gather up just a few twigs here. I really don't need too many, because again, all I'm trying to really do is just get myself warm enough. And we're gonna be trapping a lot of that heat, utilizing my favorite thing, which is the poncho. So right here with our evasion fire, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be digging down into the ground. And the biggest thing is I want something that's going to be easily naturalized. So that means that after I'm done with the fire, that I can easily make it look like it was never there.
So when I'm talking an evasion fire, the biggest thing is I want to make it look like I was never there. So if I need to put this out quickly because I hear something happens, I want to be able to do it as fast as possible. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to dig down. We're going to do about an 8 to 12 inch hole. So I'm simply actually going to cut straight into the earth. All the knife guys out there like, oh my God, his knife, no. It's a tool, dudes. I'm going to take that bit of earth right there. I'm going to take that whole clump. I'm going to set it off. That way, once I need to put this out, I can just take that whole clump and just shove it right on there. Okay, I'm going to create that nice flat base there at the bottom. So I'm going to take some of that dry prep work that I made. I'm going to create that nice little platform of wood. Do a little bit of construction out here. That's what all guys, this is literally the man's fantasy. So I've made my teeny little platform, and if you've made fires in the woods before, you know this is basically a microcosm of fire that you see large scale. There really isn't a whole lot of difference. The only difference being that it's going to be much smaller, it's going to produce a lot less heat. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting a little bit of my prep work done. So I'm trying to get these little twigs and breaking them up. That way they can burn very easily and make that little bit of heat for me. I'm going to take my sap right here, go ahead and grind that up a little bit so I can light a little bit more easily. So for our tinder, we've got a lot of nice sap right here that we've gotten our hands on. Got some of this shaved wood to help catch it. You definitely want a lot of tinder. It's really nice to have some type of tinder that you have on you. It's like cotton balls soaked in Vaseline, expanded out, or something that you buy. Cotton balls and Vaseline is what I use for most of my career. You can also do it naturally like we have right here. Just a little bit more challenging. We'll go ahead and do this. So what we're gonna wanna do is shave a little bit. Oops. This is a problem with working such a small platform, is it does have a tendency to want to shift on you. It's kind of a bitch to start an evasion fire. So I'm going to scrape a little bit off before lighting it. And the idea behind that is those sparks can then ignite. Please. There we go. Okay, so we got this started just a little bit. Now, with these fires, what we want to do is keep them pretty small, which is what makes them so difficult. So actually, all I'm going to do with this fire is I'm going to keep it very small. I'm going to take my poncho, I'm going to put it over myself, I'm going to trap that heat in the poncho.
You can pass out too.
No, you get the smoke flowing out. And all that you're doing here, keep the hood open also, is trapping that heat to warm yourself up. Another thing that works really good is going to be a sterno can. Most people don't typically have those on them, but an evasion fire is never going to get that big. You're never going to be really cooking anything. That's not the point. It's just to keep yourself alive if you absolutely need it. Then, if you hear somebody, you do put that right back down and naturalize that, except for my footprint right there, which of course you can't do much about. The point is you can put out an evasion fire fast. It's not going to be much, but it's going to be enough to keep you alive in a really bad circumstance. So you're not going to just sit with your head in the smoke. It's going to depend on the type of vegetation that you're using also. You want to have that hood open. This is a very temporary measure. When I've done it, I've maybe been in there for 30 seconds, a minute. It wasn't much. It was just enough to get my body warmed up in a really bad environment. I'd gotten really wet. I just needed to get like maybe a psychological pick-me-up. I don't know. It definitely works. If you need to, just understand how dangerous fire is. If you're taking proper care of your clothing and your equipment though, you're very likely not going to need it. So let's talk about taking care of equipment. Biggest thing about taking care of equipment is going to be treating things a little bit differently. Now with evasion, it can be a little bit tough when it comes to things like clothing. They're gonna get dirty. You wanna keep them as clean as possible. So the one thing we always said back in the old days was keep your knees out of the dirt. Because when you think about everyone putting their knees into the ground, that's what wears out the quickest. If you can, try to avoid it. Now on like some of the newer cryo combat pants, it's not as big of a thing, but still you want to take care of your clothing as much as possible. It could be all that you have on you. So what that comes down to is going to be, if you got dirt, dust, get it off. Clean up your pants as much as possible. If you're near a water source, like a river, a stream, use that to scrub some of that dirt out. Try to keep this clothing as clean as possible. Imagine having to hold on to this for a long time. There was a Japanese soldier who never got the memo that World War II had ended and ended up fighting well into the 60s. Insane story, by the way. Highly recommend you read about him. But the point being, when he finally realized that the war was over and he surrendered, he still had his Imperial Japanese Army uniform. It was still well taken care of. It had held together. This clothing can last you a long time so long as you take care of it. Remember that. With your knives, your clothing, your tools, your weapons, make sure you keep your weapon oiled. If it's snowy outside, it's icy outside, if you have some type of heated shelter, don't take it in and out. That will get that ice and water deep inside the weapon. And when it comes to your equipment, keep it off the ground. Keep it in pockets. If you need to take it out often, keep it lanyarded off to you. The point is you don't want to lose this stuff, so treat it as if it is your most prized possession, because once you lose a knife, dude, that is a bad time. Food and water. You can go 3 days without water, but I'll tell you after a day, you're freaking useless. So water is going to be a number one concern. When it comes to food, most of you probably don't need it. You can probably go a few weeks without food and be absolutely fine. The thing you have to understand about food is obviously you have the food that you're gonna have in your combat pack, that you're gonna be having with your MREs, that type of stuff. But there's gonna be a time in survival where you're probably going to eat what's naturally around you. What's great is that a shit ton of things are edible right around us. Local flora and fauna right here. I know I can nibble on the ends of these and just get a fuck ton of vitamin C. So that is just one of the many things that you can get into. When it comes to plant life, the thing you have to realize is that if you're going to identify a source that's edible, this is going to be a little bit of preparation on your part and knowing the local plants and fauna and flora. Otherwise, you might have to experiment a little, which is much more dangerous. So a couple general principles to think about. Red berries, 50-50, poison or not poison. Probably not going to mess with them in a survival scenario. White berries, anything with white berries or black dots on them, stay away from them. They're poisonous. When it comes to your blackberries and blueberries, they're almost always edible. When it comes to aggregate berries, such as raspberries, huckleberry, those are all edible. Those are good to go, despite the color, except for white, but I don't know of any white aggregate berries. So those are all gonna be good to go. When it comes to plants, like just basic leaves that we have, identify plants in your area that you know are going to be edible. Typically leaves, especially inside the bark, tubers, so like the roots themselves are going to be quite edible and nutritious. They're going to provide a lot of carbohydrates, and that's what you typically need when it comes to a survival situation because it's going to use less water. Protein uses a shit ton of water. You're probably going to be a little bit limited on water, so you want to be careful with that protein intake. Now, if you don't know if something is poisonous or not poisonous, you literally cannot find any game to eat, and you just have to eat this plant. You see this plant everywhere. You can do a basic taste test. So we'll explain how to do that. So I have identified this plant right here. I see it everywhere. I'm like, you know what? I need food. I can't find anything. I think this is edible. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and snap the branch. So it takes me a little bit more time. And what I'm looking for is any type of milk coming out, like that white milky substance. Stay away from that. That's gonna be no good for you. Once I've done that, it's gonna depend on what I'm going to eat. So am I gonna be eating the branch itself, the root itself, or the leaves? So in this case, we'll try the leaves. So what I'm gonna do is I can rub it on a sensitive part of my body. So in this case, I'll crush it up and I rub it on the inside of my wrist. What I'm going to be looking for is any type of reaction. Typically you wanna wait about 1 hour to 2 hours to see if it's good to go. So if we assume that that time has passed, there's been no reaction, what I can do is take the tip of my tongue and touch it to it.
What I'm looking for is there any type of flavor that feels immediately wrong? Is the tip of my tongue numb? Even on the most deadly plants, that tip of the tongue taste will not kill you. So you're going to be fine. If after that time has passed, everything's feeling good, what I can do is I can crush up a bunch of those leaves, go ahead and make a dip pouch out of it. I'm going to keep that in unless I notice any numbing of my lips, any weird feelings, nausea, vomiting, anything like that. Anything that feels wrong, that plant's going to be no good. After an hour, I can spit that juice out, and I don't notice any effects. What I can do after that, again, taste test does take a while. I can take a tiny portion of that, and I can just eat it. Once I've eaten it, I'm looking for any type of ill effects. Now, here's the thing with eating it. You can't have anything else in your stomach at the time you eat it to mess with that test. So, if after 24 hours, nothing's crazy is happening, I'm going to increase my amount I'm going to eat to a normal portion. If after that amount of time, nothing crazy has happened, probably an edible plant. I'm going to go ahead and eat it, get those nutrients from it. Understand that the taste test is a last resort. Much better is to simply buy a book about plants and learn what is edible in your area. I think that sounds a lot better. What about you, Micah?
Yeah.
But taste test does work. Yo, Mike, you see that deer up there, dude?
Yeah.
Would you kill a deer in a combat survival situation?
Probably not.
Why not?
Because it'll make a lot of noise.
Sure would. So think about the amount of ammunition you have, the amount of noise you're going to make. You probably want to save this for the two-legged variety. And killing a deer, it's a lot of meat. It's a lot of tracking. And if your weapon's not powerful enough, 5.56 isn't exactly a hunting caliber, you might not quite kill it. So, you know, when we used to teach people like hunting, we typically teach small animals. They're much more manageable. It's easy to gut them and skin them, and it's just easy. You're probably not going to use your gun. Even if you do use your gun, there's a chance that it's just not going to end well for you. Stay away from those large animals. I understand that it's tempting. It's a lot of meat, a lot of calories. That's typically not the right thing to do, and also it's going to leave behind a big sign of presence. If there's animals, especially huntable animals like deer, elk, moose, more than likely the locals around this area are probably going to prize those as well. And if you kill their moose, they're probably going to be looking for you because they've probably been tracking that thing too. So in general, rabbits, squirrels, birds, those are all going to be great. With those animals, just remove the internal organs, eat the meat. After an animal is freshly killed, the meat is universally good. You can just eat it. You don't have to cook it. You can sun dry it if you really want. Things I've done is I've tied it to the back of my pack and I've just let it sun dry as I've walked, or I've just eaten the meat fresh. It really isn't that big of a deal. Organs can be good to go, but you need to look for a couple signs. So generally what we say for a worldwide perspective is don't eat the organs. Stick to that meat and you're going to be good to go. If you haven't gotten an animal before, highly recommend you look it up. We actually don't know if you can show it on YouTube, so we're not going to show it right now. When it comes to water, you absolutely need it. Now, we've talked a lot about evasion principles when it comes to water and sneaking up to water, so we're not really going to spend a lot of time on that. We're going to spend a lot of time on the different implements of water. We talked a lot about iodine in the last evasion video, and the reason for that is water is dangerous because everyone needs water. Animals, people, everything. Because of that, coming to water, you're at the very least probably going to scare an animal. That could possibly telegraph your position, give you away in an evasion situation. At worst, you run into enemy forces. When we talk actual survival, where we don't have to be as weary around water, there are a couple different things that we can use. So some of my favorite stuff to use is I love the hydro packs. And the reason for this is that we have these replaceable filters right on there. So you're simply able to fill up right from the river. As long as the water is roughly moving and isn't turbid where it has a bunch of dirt or soot or silt or anything like that, I'm gonna have a pretty easy time. Beyond this, the Sawyer filters are also great, and that works great. If you don't have these types of sources for your water, you don't have these filters that are built in, you don't have a Sawyer filter on you, there are other methods. So the things that I've used in the past is I'll take like my t-shirt and I'll use that to filter water directly into a canteen. You can use like your neckerchief or your face mask. That works really well to filter out a lot of that soot and sand. And once it's in there, you're simply going to put iodine in there. You guys understand water. You can also boil it if you don't have any type of purification method, but understand that water does need to be purified. That's what we're going to primarily talk about when it comes to water. You need it. Make sure you're drinking it. When we talk about water, we talk about rationing your sweat, not water. You need to continue to drink water. You can't just ration your water. That's not the way it works. So try to make sure that you're always cold, a little bit cold. And what we mean by that is you don't want to be sweating a whole bunch. being a little bit lazy when it comes to survival is going to go a long way. So open up your layers, keep yourself cooled off, don't sweat. In the Arctic, in fact, you can die from sweat because that sweat can get all over your body. Then as you cool down, it's going to freeze your body, possibly put you into hypothermia. More than likely, it was like negative 80 degrees when I was up there in the Arctic Circle, and yeah, that's going to be straight death if you sweat.
Comms and signaling. There might be a time when you need to communicate or signal friendly forces or somebody to get away, to get to safety. It's all going to depend on who you're fighting in Arma 3 in Minecraft. So understand that cell phones are generally a very bad idea depending on who you're going up against, because that signal is very easily detectable, intercepted, and exploited, and you're gonna catch a hellfire. So probably not. So if you have a cell phone, put it in a Faraday bag. They're very easy to buy. You can find them everywhere, and they'll block the signal completely if you absolutely need your cell phone on you. Otherwise, you might be using a radio. Understand that depending on if you're transmitting without encryption, that again is very easy to triangulate, intercept, and exploit. So be careful. Transmit sparingly. Transmit on a comm schedule. So like an example, the comm schedule would be we check in with each other every 2 hours at the top of the hour or something along those lines, to keep your emissions of radio energy to a minimum. If you do have encryption, still be very careful. Treat it as if you're transmitting in the open. Don't use your names, don't use exact locations. Everything should be done via ciphers, via some type of way of scrambling the numbers and the letters if you have to give exact information. For example, if I had to give my coordinates in MGRS, rather than just spitting out my exact coordinates over the radio net, we'd have some type of crypto key that we could read to each other where we'd have to decrypt it to know that information. And again, if that gets captured, then you need to change your crypto information. So comms, important, probably not as important to most of you, but it is a consideration. Just understand that given the technology and capability of many many people throughout the world, that it's a dicey move. So be careful. Travel. You might have been spotted, you might need to travel. It is combat evasion, and you do have to get places. We're not going to do a full travel video today because it takes a lot for navigation. But a couple of good things you need to know. One, you should know your area. You should know where you are. You should have a map of the area, and you should have a map of the area that is at a scale that is enough to navigate off of. I've seen, you can get those giant maps that have like the entire state of Washington or Idaho on them, and it's like, great, this doesn't help me at all for topography. So make sure you have a map that will show you the topography of where you are well enough that you can translate that and move off of it.
But what if I don't have one?
If you don't have a map?
Yeah.
Well, you should have you're probably fighting for your home turf, so you should probably know your home turf a little bit.
So let's do research.
Let's do a little bit of research. Now, if you are completely lost, you've been shot at, you're discombobulated, you have no idea where you are, and you're like, damn, I actually am not sure where I am right now. Like, I'm not sure which direction is which, like where my cardinal directions are, northeast, southwest. One, you should have compass on you. Right here we have a little Sunto wrist compass, which work really well. I typically recommend a Linsatic compass that is like a military compass. You can do a lot of work on them. We'll expand upon that in a later video. But if for whatever reason you don't have a compass, you don't know, I've seen a lot of really weird shit. People like, oh yeah, moss only grows on the north side of a tree. Completely false, you're gonna die. So one thing that we can do, however, is I always do wear an analog watch. One, because in this case, this is a perpetual, so it's just powered by my movement, so I'm always going to have the time. But more importantly, you can also navigate off of it. So I have the sun right there. Don't look into the sun. And what I'm going to do in the northern hemisphere is I'm going to point the 12 o'clock at the sun, and halfway between the sun and my hour hand is going to be south. So if you come over here, Micah, okay. There's noon. My hour hand, it's just a little past noon.
There's the sun.
So I'm going to be just between the hour hand and the sun, and if I hold up my wrist compass, 180 degrees, that's due south. God damn, it works. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So a lot of people get really confused because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but the further northern in elevation you are, the kind of wonkier it gets. So worst case scenario as well, if you are completely lost and you got a little time on your hands, you can also look at approximately where that sun is setting, and that's going to give you an approximate distance. There are many ways to find direction. There's also the stick method. We're not going to show it today. I prefer the watch method. It's quick, it's dirty, or just have a compass on you. couple of things to think about. So if we come over here and we look down this hill right here, that's a pretty steep hill. And one thing to realize is that human beings are pretty lazy. You have a tendency to want to take the easier path. So when you're traveling and you don't want to get sucked down into these drainages, if you want to stay on this more just on a hillside, what I typically recommend as you're navigating is that you stick to the uphill side of trees as you're walking, or bushes. That's going to help you keep yourself from getting sucked down. That's a basic tip that I have. Beyond that, guys, know your area. That's going to help you get where you want, and full video and navigation later. So let's go ahead and let's finish this up. Combat survival is brutal. It's violent. Combat evasion is brutal and violent, and the two of them go together. You need to understand both. These two videos that we've done so far are the absolute beginner courses in this subject material. I spent 6+ years, at this point 12 years, doing this stuff, and I still don't even know a quarter of the information. The best guys are the guys who are like 90+, just living in the woods. The point is, know this. You don't want to be in a situation where you need it and you've never learned it, you've never practiced it, and that's what's going to make you good. I can't make you a survival expert. I can't make you an evasion expert. That's going to be on you. I can show you the base knowledge, but the only way you're going to get good at this stuff is actually getting out into nature right here. So get out, explore nature, practice this stuff, because God forbid the moment ever comes when you need to use it, you're going to be glad that you invested the small amount of time that you did into it. Because I'll be honest, man, you can come out here, you can bring your family to the woods, you can camp, you can have a good time doing this stuff, have a good time with the boys, have a good time with your children, your wife. It doesn't have to be something where you feel like you have to dedicate so much time to it and be away from your family. This can all be done together. So guys, please get out there and train. It's vitally important. I don't know what the future holds, but I will say that human history is rife with violence. So always be prepared. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We love you guys so much. And as always, we got nothing else for you. Final thing for you guys. You know, a lot of people talk about buying all the coolest, latest stuff, but as we've always said, man, just train, because going to dead is never cool.